My name is Czeslaw Maryszczak, Czeslaw Maryszczak for short. I was born in Grabowce in the year 1936. My parents owned a small farm in Grabowce, and my two brothers, Michael and Joseph, shared the house with me. I do recall only a couple of items from living in Grabowce, and one was going every day with a cup of asking for hot or rather warm milk straight from the cow, which were being milked every morning. The other item I do remember is my two brothers going on separate horses to the river to give them a good swim in the river, and they thought it would be fun if I shared that experience and put me it was Michael who put me on the front of him on a horse, and I screamed my head, and they just couldn't carry on any further, so they had to come back from the river and put me on the shore where they were doing their swimming on the horses, and I was just screaming all the time. So those are the two items I do recall. Now, in the year 1940, we were forcibly deported to Siberia by the Russian troops, and we couldn't take very much from whatever my mother was saying. She was asked to take whatever she wanted to take, and but my father was kept under control, and we were given 1 hour to pack whatever we wanted to pack. Now, after that, we were taken to the station where the train was awaiting with lots of other people from Grabowce. So those were the memories of my time in Poland, and the rest of the journey to Russia, all I can remember is being hungry and without any proper food. But once we arrived in Siberia, called Ozierki near Świerdłowsk, we had a very, very frugal and starving diet. The mother, father and the two brothers were working, whereas I was actually in a small preschool gathering which happened every day, where my brother Michael used to take me to by my hand, and I do remember lots of snow at the time, and in that assembly we were singing praises to Uncle Stalin, who was our savior, and in the morning he was portrayed as the sun, a rising sun, and in the evening as before going to sleep we were supposed to be happy at his saying goodbye and good night to us as children, because he was everything to us. And those are the memories of my stay in Ozierki in Siberia. During the amnesty in the year 2 years later, we were parted with my father, who went to join the Polish army earlier than we did. There were reasons for that which I won't go into, but we stayed behind. But my mother, after a few days, decided with other people we better do something and go away from the place where we were, which we as a group with other Polish people decided to go to the nearest station and started traveling. on the way to Tashkent, it took us a long time, and we arrived there and managed after a while to get a train towards Caspian Sea. Now, we didn't get all the way in Yakubak station. We had to stop because there were no further connections, and I do remember living in a very, very humble place, a coal shed by the railway station, where my mother and brother Michael went to hospital because of typhus. Now, a day or so later, my father was traveling on the same train to Caspian Sea, and he did manage to see me and my brother Joe by that railway line, and he got off at the next station and walked back to our spot where we were, and asked Joe, my brother, to where was the mother, where was Michael, and he told them they were both in hospital suffering from typhus. So he went, and luckily brother Michael was ready to come, so say, home, because the temperature was receded, and he was ready to do it. He was very, very weak, and my father virtually carried him back to where we were. And the next day he did the same with my mother, but unfortunately he contracted the typhus disease, which was prevalent in that place, and within a fortnight he was dead. And I always thought that, felt rather guilty really, because I felt if it wasn't perhaps because of me, he probably would be alive. But I've been told by many people that don't think about that, because these things happen to other people as well. Therefore, there's no point in thinking about that. So those are the memories of the death of my father. The only other incident is his burial. He was put in a sheet cloth, which my mother couldn't carry it, my brother couldn't carry it. We found, or my mother found difficulty in getting somebody to carry the body to the place where he would be buried, which she found a priest and another Jewish person who carried the body in the sheet, and we as a family followed, and we were crying, and we came to the spot where we could not bury, but we could only cover it with stones and various other rubbish which we could find, because there were no facilities to either dig a grave or fit enough people to do the job. So those are the two items that I do remember that happened in the Yakubak station. After the funeral of my father in Yakubak, we made our swift journey to Caspian Sea, where the Polish troops were being formed. There I encountered a situation whereby the Polish units were already giving to the people who came off the train some bread and butter, and my mother and the two brothers said to me, "You are the youngest, you go and ask for bread and butter, and because we are too old." And I didn't want to do that because I was a very shy young Polish boy. So, but eventually I was persuaded to do so, and after getting the 3 slices of bread and butter, I was not a very good boy, and I didn't want to share my winnings with anybody. and but eventually my mother scolded me, and the two brothers told me to not be so silly, and I had to actually share the bread with them. Now from Caspian Sea we boarded the ship to cross the Caspian Sea to go to Pahlevi. Now this would have been a much more of a pleasant journey because of the sea and the fresh air and all that, but it wasn't so because the ship was overloaded by the Polish civilians who were not supposed to go with the soldiers, because the Stalin agreed with the Polish authorities that only the Polish troops were to cross the Caspian Sea to Tehran, and not the Polish other people. Yet General Anders in his wisdom said, you let everybody go on a ship, because these people, the mothers and the children, will starve to death if we leave them behind. So this is what happened, and this is why the ship was overloaded, and the roughness of the waters and all that made it a very, very bad journey to Pahlevi, which is the place where we headed to in Persia. Once we landed in Pahlevi, we were transported to Tehran and lived under in tents, where the food was much better because we were eating the lamb, which was the English staple diet of the British troops. And because of the hunger of the Polish people straight from Siberia, they overate and became very, very ill. Consequently, there is a big cemetery in Tehran where there's a lot of Polish people who died because of the diet they were guilty of introducing, rather than eating very small amounts and perhaps not so much meat. Nevertheless, we survived. My mother and I were separated and said goodbye to my two brothers, who, after putting extra number of years to their birth certificate, they joined the army, and we said goodbye to them, and they, I remember, gave me a large piece of chocolate, where I did really appreciate, and said goodbye, and we parted company. And me and my mother were then transported to Karachi in India, and the brothers went their separate ways to the Middle East as Polish troops. So the reason we went to Karachi and stopped there, because there was a lot of activity in the Indian Ocean of the U-boats, German U-boats, whereas we couldn't, or at least it was decided not to cross the Indian Ocean because it was too dangerous. So we spent 6 months in Karachi awaiting for better times to cross the Indian Ocean. Now, after the 6 months, we boarded the ship and went across without too much trouble to the port of Mombasa in Kenya, where we boarded the trains to take us to Kampala in Uganda. This journey took 3 days of a very exhausting journey, but it was much warmer, there was more food, and therefore it was more enjoyable than obviously the journeys of the train we had before. So we were very thankful for that. Now, once we arrived in Kampala, the lorries waited for us, and we had to board these lorries with all the whatever baggage we had, and we were transported on a very what shall we say, a third-rate roads to a jungle place, which is probably now a much better, bigger place, but at that time it was purely jungle, and the place was called Masindi. There we had a very primitive first camp built of mud and straw, and elephant grass was used for thatched roof, and those were our accommodation. And I do remember that now, when we actually arrived at the place, it was already getting a little bit dark. Our mums, they all cried because they thought they were going to get somewhere which was much better than Siberia in Russia, and they looked at it and they saw these mud huts which looked very primitive. Once in Masindi, which was our future home for the next 6 years, we encountered a very primitive living, which consisted of these mud huts, and the kitchen was about 20-50 meters away from the main hut, which was a kitchen, and then the same 20-30 meters away from the mud huts was the little shed acted as a toilet. Now, to get there and back through vegetation where snakes and other things were existent was not a very happy situation, and whether it was mums or us children, we were afraid to go to toilet in the middle of the night. But after a number of days and eventually weeks, the clearance of space between the mud huts, our accommodation, and the kitchen and the toilet was cleared. We started growing flowers and things in this garden, and of course there were no longer any more snakes, and we started, well, at least I was started not wearing shoes, and not quite sure why I didn't quite like shoes, but my mother always insisted that you must wear shoes to go to church. It's just unthinkable of going to mass without shoes. So I used to cry and said, no, I don't want shoes and all this, because I got used to the temperature of the soil, because that was the first thing. I couldn't walk barefooted because the soil was just too hot. But eventually my feet got the hang of this temperature, and I liked going barefooted to the jungle, which I used to go quite often after going to school till 12 o'clock, and then going from school to my mother to have a little bit to eat, because she worked in hospital and could give me some food there, and then in the jungle, and after the jungle of course came back home and went to bed. That I got used to it so much that it became a very pleasurable thing for me to go to, in a very hot day, to the jungle where it used to be very cool, and there was a stream flowing through it, and we used to play in the stream, build the little dams and all the rest of it. And so that was the way of life which I thoroughly enjoyed. The best time of my life was in fact in Uganda. The only thing that has spoiled the situation was the malaria, which I used to get, if not every month, at least once every 2 months. And of course, malaria is very, very, you suffer from the high temperature, and you are 1 minute very, very hot, and the next minute you are very, very cold. But eventually I got used to even having malaria. And so those were the difficult times, in spite of having a net over one's bed to stop any kind of malaria mosquitoes getting through. But because playing in the jungle and walking around during the day and all the rest of it, of course, it's very, very difficult to escape from not being bitten by mosquitoes. Now, the thing that I most enjoyed in Africa were A, the school, B, the food, and C, I suppose, now and again having a little entertainment. I do remember in a jungle clearance, they made a clearance in a jungle, and after 7 o'clock in Uganda, because we were virtually on the equator, the light virtually, it was like a switch off time, and became dark. So we were sat down with chairs, and there was a big screen, for cinema screen, put in front with a motor running to ready for the cameras to be operated. And there was a gorilla in front of the screen on the chain, walking up and down the rope, and we as children would throw sweets at him, and he caught the things, but eventually we didn't have enough sweets, so it was a question of wrapping up the sweet paper, and we put stones in it. But the gorilla was not a fool, and he caught those things and threw it back at us. And so we really enjoyed that. And the first ever film in my life that I saw in this clearance in the jungle was Tarzan and Jane. And I even remember the Johnny Weissmuller was the Tarzan, and Jane, I forget now the actress who played Jane, but it doesn't matter. Now, because of that experience, I thought the music and everything with the film was really fantastic. But the reason was because the animals were all the way around us in this clearance, jungle clearance, that everything like stereophonic music was supplied by the animals, which were in the trees all the way around us. So to me that was one of the brilliant things that I encountered in Africa. And for 6 years I was very, very happy. We eventually built a church in Masindi, and the accommodation was improved, and the facilities of cooking and various other things were improved. And I even remember doing a Polish sausage, climbing on the kitchen chimney and being given by my mother some Polish type of sausage that I had to put on the rings and on the chimney. They used to be smoked there, and we would have it as a true Polish sausage after so many hours of it being smoked. So the life in Uganda, to my mind, was the best part of my life for 6 years, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and was very not too happy to finish that sort of life, because my mother was asked after 1945, which was much later, because it was 1947-48 that she was asked whether she would like to go back to Poland, because Poland now was free, the elections took place, and you can go back from this place and go back to Poland. And so she was asked by this English manager of the whole place, although there was a translator, but my mother said no thank you. She knows what the Russian democracy is all about, and she would not go back to Poland because it wasn't free. So the manager said, well, what are you going to do? And she said, I remember, she said, oh, I'll stay here. So this was her answer. She was prepared to stay in the jungle, and that's what she did. But after about 6 or so months, the British government said that mothers could join their sons in England, because before that only wives could join their husbands, which was that particular law was passed. But then after 6 months we were able to go and join our 2 brothers in the UK, which was towards the end of 1948. My journey in 1948 from Masindi, Uganda to UK started with a very short, by that I mean about 4 or 5 hour journey to Kodja in near Victoria Shores, Lake Victoria, where another Polish camp was set up after the war, because this is where we were going to catch our train to Mombasa. Now, people in the UK think that a half an hour wait for a train journey is a big issue, but I can tell you that in Kodja we waited 3 months to get our train to Mombasa. Now, it was a very pleasant stay in Kodja, because we were actually next door to Lake Victoria, and where I learned the story of a young Polish boy, and I sat on that particular shore of Lake Victoria, who was swimming from the shore to a rock about 50 meters away from the shore. 3 boys were swimming, 2 who were not so good. One was a much more stronger and proficient swimmer, and after he swam 3/4 of the way, people started calling from the shore, "The crocodile on the left, the crocodile on the left." And he said, "Oh, I am nearly at the rock, so I'll continue." And the other 2, shall we say, less able swimmers, started returning back. And the crocodile caught the fast swimmer, and we never saw him again. So, of course, that story was the end. Now, that was the only sorry incident that happened in the Kodja. The rest of the time was very, very enjoyable. The temperature was very good, and the climate was, the monkeys were happy. And I do remember an incident where our menfolk who used to shave on the veranda of the particular houses, they used to shave in a normal way, and the monkeys are monkeys. And I do remember sitting on the lake, shore of Victoria Lake, looked up to one of the houses, and there was the monkey looking in a mirror and picking up a razor blade, and trying to shave, and I thought, wait a minute, it's going to cut itself, because it was one of those Polish sharp razor blades, which is throat cut, I think it was called. And but no sooner the monkey picked up this thing and started mimicking the shaving action, the owner came out, and she went away. Now, those were the pleasant moments, and every morning the natives were sort of canoeing their canoes around the lake, and it was a beautiful sight, and so it was just like being on holiday. Those are the happy moments of Kodja, the Polish camp there. After those 3 months, we boarded the train, and the journey through Nairobi to Mombasa was very good, uneventful. We safely arrived in Mombasa, waited in Mombasa for 11 days, not quite sure why 11, but that was the magic number of days, and I'll tell you why later, where we boarded a ship called Scythia, and which took us all the way to Liverpool in UK, with some British troops on board as well. And we did dock in Malta. The reason I say this, because this is my last time that I had malaria, because on the ship, for some reason, I must have contracted in Kodja, the mosquito must have bit me somewhere, and therefore, so I had the temperature and all the malaria symptoms on the ship, and by the time we arrived in Liverpool, I was okay, and from then on until today I've never had a malaria again. And although I've been to countries where malaria is ripe, but of course we do have better, presumably quinine and mapicrine, which were the basic medicines for malaria. So we arrived in the UK, Liverpool, in August 1948, which was still summer. Now we arrived in Gloucestershire in the camp called Daglinworth, which was the transitional camp before being transported to various other Polish camps in the UK. Now the reason I mentioned 11 days before, because that's exactly how long we took to stay in Daglinworth before we were transported to Melton Mowbray in Leicestershire, where, because of one of my brother Michael was in the Polish RAF. Now, so we were there for about a couple of years, and I went to school there for a little while before being transferred to Diddington in Huntingdonshire, where I stayed for 2 years. It was a Polish modern secondary school, before being transferred to an English college, of technical college it used to be called, and so I stayed 2 years in that college before joining my first job in the Certified and Corporate Accountants in Cheltenham, where I joined and became an articled clerk for 5 years. So that is my kind of education, which was 5 years of consisted of 1 year in Uganda, shall we say, 2 years in UK of a Polish schooling, and 2 years of English, and then joining the accountants for 5 years, where the start of my professional life began. My bachelor years started when I started work with the certified accountants, which, as I said, was for 5 years articles as an articled clerk. Now, apart from studying in the evenings for my accountant's qualifications, I did have enough time to pursue other activities like a bit of dancing, going to pictures, and I joined the Polish youth club where we used to meet once a week playing table tennis or doing a bit of dancing or meeting girls and just having a good chat. Now that enabled me to broaden my outlook, not just studying but also with tennis, which I loved, a game of tennis. Apart from dancing, I loved my tennis very much, and this was where I met my future wife Jill, playing tennis, and we one evening played against each other, but then went for a drink, and then I asked her to come to the dance hall in the Cheltenham Town Hall, and from then on it went on, and I courted for maybe a few years, and then in 1959 we actually got married and lived in Cheltenham ever since. And she came to Cheltenham in 1952, I think it was, the same as my coming to Cheltenham, because she was born in London, but then went to Darlington, and then with her father and parents came to Cheltenham in 1952. So we both came to the town in the same year. So we'd married life starting in 59. The children came, and we enjoyed our life. Not that we had much money, because I finished my articles and started working for a short couple of years with Marley Concrete, and then another 3 years with Gloucester Aircraft Company, which was a local company, and from after that joined Bovis building company, where I've stayed for the rest of my working life, retiring in the year 1999, end of that year. So that is my married life. But I married Jill, who was a great reader, and she knew Polish history probably better than I did, although her spelling wasn't as good as mine, so she used to ask me for spelling. But her Polish was of historical book knowledge, and the various cooking skills, which my mother, who lived in the same house as us, because we had a large house and she had her flat in that house, and they got on very well, and my mother gave all the recipes, or rather the way to do them rather than the recipes, and so she was the best bigos cook in town. And so she became very, very knowledgeable about Polish songs, about Polish cooking, and Polish everything really, apart from the language. She wasn't a linguist, and therefore we went for the first time for a holiday into Poland in 1976, which was my first ever visit to Poland. And she enjoyed her visit, and we had to visit a number of houses per day, because there were lots of family living at that time, and we had the usual thing, sandwiches and various chickens and meat and all the rest of it, and lots of vodka for 5 houses in one day, which was a lot. And therefore, with all the drinking, the singing becomes a natural thing to do. But Jill was very good. She knew all the Polish songs, and she was conducting all the choirs in every household. They were all very surprised that an English person could know all the Polish songs, but she did, because myself as a Polish youth club chairman eventually, and eventually in 1964 I joined the Polish Ex-Combatants Association and was very active in that, and also the church. And she supplied all the culinary skills that she acquired from my mother, and she was always doing all the dances that we used to organize in big venues in Cheltenham, and the theatre, and all the rest of it. So whether it was Refrain or Hemar or all the other Polish famous people were coming, she would be the one who would organize something to eat afterwards. So very, very Polish orientated person, and our marriage lasted for 56 years until she died. And so the life in Cheltenham to us was really good, and I'm still living in Cheltenham, and I regard the place as my best hometown ever, because all the other places I've been to were very temporary. Well, apart from Uganda in Africa 6 years, the other places were whether it was Siberia or wherever, they were just transitional places. Whereas here in Cheltenham, we had a house and really established ourselves as family. In 1964, I became a member of the Polish Ex-Combatants Association, which at that time was the only association in Cheltenham, because the youth club has gone by then. So I became first of all a member and a treasurer of the association. That meant a lot to me, because I was always very keen of promoting social things in Polish people who started the Polish Ex-Combatants Association from the army days, which basically was from the 2nd Corps of the Italian campaign and the 1st Armoured Division from the European General Maczek's soldiers. And they settled in this country in various camps, and then they started going from camps to the various cities, but they needed something to call their own places, to organize dances, to organize schools, to organize their Independence Days and the 3rd of May commemorations and various other social activities, which they did by purchasing clubs, buildings, where they could carry out these various functions, which was a very big attraction to other people, because they could go to theatre, they could go to a film, Polish film, they could go to whatever other functions there were in these clubs, which were clubs, but they had a purpose of drawing Polish people together and commemorating and discussing things of importance to them and to the Polish people. So that was very, very important organization, and it started in the UK in 1946, and it eventually had about 29 clubs in country Great Britain, and ran lots of schools, lots of theatre groups, sports clubs, and various other activities which enabled the Polish people to live in a normal social life in this country. The social aspect of Polish SPK, as Polish Ex-Combatants Association, presented was very, very important to the Polish people. Now, they provided meeting places for all the people, and in those days, if you remember, dances and various other things were very, very popular, and therefore this is where the clubs made their money. Theatre was another, but dances were very, very important. Not so much discos, which came later, and they were not all that popular, but Polish dances were very, very popular. So consequently, I, as a chairman, with my committee, we used to organize all these various activities, not only for the Cheltenham people, but people who lived in various camps in Gloucestershire, and there were 11 of them in Gloucestershire alone, starting from Allenwood in Cheltenham to Northwick Park near Morton in Marsh, through Staverton near Gloucester, and the various other things, Spring Hill near Chipping Campden, and all this. So there were many Polish camps which were not yet closed. Eventually, bit by bit, they were being closed because National Assistance Board, who used to run these camps, were very keen to finish those camps. So the Polish young people started moving from the camps to various cities. They were perhaps entering universities and various other schooling establishments, and they also were keen perhaps to start work somewhere which was much more lucrative financially than being in a camp near some small village where the employment was not very profitable. So this is how the camp life started. It was purely Polish and all that, but eventually they started moving away to other cities. But of course, in those other cities, they started buying properties because they wanted a club in Leicester, they wanted a club in Worcester, they wanted a club in Kidderminster, Coventry, Birmingham, Manchester, and various other places. So in the end, we had 29 various clubs in the country, including London, of course, because we had about 3 big buildings in London. But eventually, when POSC started coming up, and they wanted the money because they were run out of money to build the POSC, the SPK sold the 3 properties and invested in POSC. Not many people remember this, but if it wasn't for that generous gesture, I don't think what would happen with POSC. So all in all, we were the Polish Ex-Combatants Association, the motor and the biggest sort of social organization of not Cheltenham, but of all the UK. Now, other Polish people or ex-soldiers, shall we say, who came after the war and settled in UK, well, not exactly settled, because very quickly they started saying, well, perhaps we'll be better off in Canada, or perhaps we ought to move into Australia and Argentina and the USA and all that. And that's where they went. And in those various other countries, they also formed their clubs and various activities. And for that reason, the Polish Ex-Combatant Association worldwide association was formed and then there were various chairmen of that association, but eventually after many years, I became a chairman of that association, which is still in existence, and I've been over 13 years now as chairman of that association, which I'm very keen to keep in touch with, whether it's Canada, France or Australia or any other country in Europe. And so we are still keeping the association going, but there are certain countries like Great Britain where we've came to the end of the situation whereby the veterans were numerically very small, and they decided at their conference to close the association as Great Britain and formed a foundation by selling various clubs and putting the money in there, and now we are supplying money for various Polish cultural causes, like whether it's writing historical books, building monuments, any kind of activity which is to promote the Polish culture. That's where we invest our money. So this is at the moment where we are, and America had to dissolve their association because they, in their statute, they could only have veterans in the association, and they couldn't have any other people because the law did not allow them to do so. Polish Ex-Combatants Association Trust Fund in Great Britain does fund many Polish cultural initiatives, and it does cover in some cases work done in other countries. For example, we've got money for Świątynia Opatrzności in Poland, in Warsaw, which we've contributed quite a bit of money, but in most cases it is to do with the British activities, which are, for example, the National Memoriam Arboretum monument to the Polish servicemen, Army, Navy, Air Force and AK and others. So we are basically Great Britain, but this is not excluding other countries. Great Britain Trust Fund is chaired by myself, and we at this point of time haven't got we have got members who are younger than me, and therefore they can, within their association, can elect whoever they feel is the best man or lady for the job. So, but we haven't got a name at this point of time. So consequently, I shall lead as long as I can, but if tomorrow or next month the committee decide that my time has ended, then that is the decision of this committee, and by law that is the way we elect the future of the association. The Polish Ex-Combatants Association worldwide is something which is to me very important, because it's a brotherhood of not only men but also ladies who mm, are aiming at the same thing, in other words, promoting the Polish culture in each country. It was not always very easy just after the war, where people had to, for example, coming to a country, whether it was Canada or Great Britain or any other country like Australia, to they had to work, for example, in Canada on a farm for 5 years before they could actually find any other job. And in this country, which is Great Britain, we had to work in certain industries like coal mining, farming, and a few others, where people had to work in those places before, after the required number of years, they could work in other places. So keeping together as a Polish community was very, very important, because we felt we were together, we were stronger, we were still in some cases hoping to go back to Poland when it became free. Now, this was always a very important issue, but it didn't materialize until the Poland did get its independence. But in those countries it carried on, and it's still carrying on good work, whether it's Canada, Australia, and France, and a few other countries. They are promoting culture, and we in Great Britain are promoting culture as well by means of the foundation. So consequently, it was the best and the biggest organization after the war, and now it diminishing in its value, but nevertheless in certain countries it is still very strong, and therefore very, very needy, because they have good structure of the organization, and therefore they are carrying out good work and will be for many more years to come. And being together as a worldwide organization is a very important issue, because, for example, before the organization having its Polish origins, for example, in Poland, it was accepted as an associate member of the Worldwide Association after it was established that it wasn't of the Polish ex-communist soldiers, but the true Polish soldiers who fought for the freedom of the country, and they were for many, many years also one of the members of the Polish Ex-Combatants Association worldwide. But now they are no longer there because they've disbanded as well. But nevertheless, the countries who are maintaining their status of the organization are still doing great work, and very proud of it, and they should be so, because they are tremendous in their activities and also the work they do now. And I'm also pleased to say, after visiting Canada and France, and I'm very pleased to report that they are doing great work, and I hope they will do that work for many, many more years to come.